Welcome back. We're glad to have you on. We move on to our next guest in just a few minutes, but we thank you for listening and for watching. This is Brighter Morning with Bhoe, and my name is Bhoe Tiwari, and you are on U97.5 FM, Hot Like Pepper Radio, Multicultural Radio, and MCTV Multicultural TV. One of the news items there before we go on to our next guest was about tutors meeting with the Ministry of Education. So a meeting did take place, and the tutor representative is raising issues about the preparedness of the school beyond the COVID vaccination situation. So I think that those are also issues on the agenda. Obviously, the vaccination of our children is very important, but also preparing the schools to make sure that when children do go in their vaccinated state to school, that they get a good education. Remember, there is a deficit now. Children have been online. They have been away from school, and many of the children, many of the homes did not have devices on which the children could follow. The internet doesn't always work well. It was a new technology for many. Some schools did well, some schools did not do well with the technology. And there have been, little hiccups in the transition period. And we've got to get that right. And pretty soon we're going to have to recognize that the technological part of education is going to be here to stay. And we need to be alert and aware of that. Just one bit of international news before we go. This situation in Afghanistan is going to become a world problem. We've had occupation of that country by the Russians, and they spent nearly a decade there, and they left. And then the US came in that country. And after all of these years, it seems that the capacity of government and governmental system and the military capacity to protect the state, its institutions, and the people of the country, and to offer them security has not been established after all of this time. The Taliban has clearly been under-assessed in terms of their energy, their vitality, their passion, their commitment to take power in the country, because that is what is at stake now. And it is questionable whether the city can, in fact, hold in Afghanistan. And it is possible that the government may fall, or that the Taliban may overrun the city, because they have overrun everything else. They have taken over everything else. The casualties of this literally a civil war taking place in the country, the casualties are the people. And you have a situation which the United Nations is now warning about another refugee situation we might end up with, asking other countries not to close their borders. Pakistan closed its borders yesterday, and that caused a certain amount of tension and crisis. Obviously, they were persuaded to open, because they opened today, and that means that people can now cross over and get supplies, and more than that, get refuge in those countries, because a lot of people are going to be in difficulty. Ordinary people are going to be in difficulty. Right now, what the U.S. is doing is trying to move out their forces from the country because they are leaving the country by the end of August. And what they are also doing is trying to take those people from Afghanistan who helped them in their effort against the Taliban so that they will not become victims of Taliban revenge. But the Taliban is a very authoritarian force, and when they take power, people will be decimated, some people. And whoever they see as an ally of the U.S., or whoever they see as resistant to Taliban rule and Taliban ideology, and whoever they see as the enemy, they will deal with, they will liquidate. And their way of dealing with this is by execution. So we headed for a very difficult situation there, and we are probably headed for a situation in which we are going to have a refugee situation. The largest refugee displacement and asylum seeking situation in the world has been in Syria. The second largest has been in Venezuela, next to us, and the third largest has been in the Saharan region, where you've had basically the collapse of a country and the establishment of another one, and refugees coming out of that process. Okay? So we thank you for watching. We thank you for listening. This is Brighter Morning with Bhoe. It is on MCTV, Multicultural TV, and U97.5 Radio. We welcome all our viewers and listeners growing every day. So we have Mr. Watson Duke on the phone now and on the video. He's not? Mr. Duke is not on? Can we get him on? Is he on? For a minute there, Mr. Duke, we couldn't find you, so I'm glad to see you. I'm glad you're here.
Yes, it's been quite a long time. It's been quite a long time, my brother, since I've seen you.
How are you going?
I'm great, man. I'm doing fine by the graces of God and the love of the people. I'm doing fine. What about yourself?
I'm doing good. As you see, I'm trying to I continue my process of education. I mean, that is the whole point. I mean, this really is an opportunity for educating people in the community and members of our society or citizens. Secondly, I'm trying to keep the conversation and the discussion uplifting and enlightening and constructive. And I offer the opportunity here to anybody who wishes to have it, an opportunity to have their say, because democracy depends on contending voices having their say, you know? So I know I know you appreciate that, so I'm grateful that you are here. And I sent you something yesterday. Did you get it? You got it, right?
I'm not sure.
All right, okay. All right, it was just to help this conversation, but we will begin.
Okay, yes. But whatever it is, I'm ready.
Yeah,
Dr. Tiwari, you know I'm ready, right?
Yeah. Well, I know you are a man always prepared.
Issues, then he cannot speak of the issue. He's be a foreigner.
Yeah. Well, I know that you are always prepared and you are always ready, and you pride yourself on that. So tell me something. Given this situation with COVID and the opening up of the economy now on Monday, how do you see that unfolding, and what do you have to say? I mean, what do you have to say to your own members in the PSA?
Allow me to say that I'm happy that our economy is opening up. I'm happy that persons who were once unemployed will have a chance again to be employed and earn money, and companies that have not been making money will have a chance to make money. I'm totally happy about that. What I'm not so happy about that is the preparedness of this government, this PNM government, to take charge of what is a public health concern and to protect the people of Tobago and Trinidad, or Trinidad and Tobago. That to me is cause for concern, because we have a lot of employers that are running around like headless chicken looking for war. And I see war because they're trying to put the working class against the ruling class. And that to me should not be ever done by people who are thinking. They are doing that by forcing people to get vaccinated. How could you force someone to be vaccinated? They are doing that by forcing people to reveal their medical status. If you can't bring your card, don't come to work. That is wrong. They are trying to take away from people the very single thing that makes them human, all right? Which is the freedom of choice. That is the thing that makes us human. Animals can't choose. Animals operate by impulse, pure stimuli or stimulus. Human beings, however, they have something that allows them to reason and to make decisions. They are trying to take that away from us. They are trying to say to us, don't think about it, don't question it, just do it because it is science. That is what I'm concerned about. So on one hand, I'm happy that the economy is opening up, jobs will be opening back, people are going back to work. On the other hand, I'm unhappy because the government has not done enough to protect the working class of this country. So the working class of this country could pride themselves on going back to work, knowing that I'm going back to work as a human being and not as a robot or someone who has been defeated to make a penny.
I mean, you think the government, or what you call the ruling class, we'll talk about that a little bit, but do you think that the government is forcing people to take the vaccine, or do you think that there is a kind of collaboration that is taking place between private sector, and the private sector has an interest in opening up their business and doing commerce and so on, between the NGOs who have an interest, of course, in seeing people vaccinated because they want this society to get back to as normal as it can be, and the government who wants to see the economy open up more and to have government and business and society operating. You think that there is really a kind of forcing of the vaccine, or they are simply seeking to persuade and encourage people to take the vaccine?
Dr. Tiwari, this is force. It can be described in no other language. You can paint it, you can slice it, you can dice it. You could even put some Angostura bitters into it to make it tasty. I'm saying to you, this is force. The government is forcing workers by the use of such phrases as vaccinate to operate. What does that phrase mean? Vaccinate to operate. So if you don't vaccinate, can't you operate? Vaccinate to operate. We understand the importance of vaccination. We understand the importance of persons protecting themselves and thus protecting everyone. But what we do not understand is the government coming up with a foolish and a wicked mandate that says to a people in a democratic country, under a democratic rule, that vaccinate to operate. It seems as if the government has already made up their mind that the only way you can operate is if you vaccinate. I'm saying I will have none of it. I will defend anyone who comes and say they have to vaccinate in order to operate. I'm saying no. People have been doing a fantastic job, Dr. Tiwari, insofar as protecting themselves. Of the 1.5 million people live in this country, we only have about 30,000 persons, thereabout 35,000 persons contracting the disease of the 1.5 million people living here. I'm saying when you do that and you juxtaposition the amount of persons who have ever contracted COVID, maybe a maximum of 40,000 so much, and you put that against 1.5 million people. You must give kudos to the people. You must respect the people of this country for following public health protocols and adhering to the highest standards of sanitizations, etc. Give them kudos. Don't try to make them feel as if they have done something wrong. Vaccinate to operate. You, the unvaccinated, you are a threat to those who are vaccinated. I'm saying no, no, no. The government has it wrong. But I believe in the economy. It's time for economy to be reopened. It's time for it to thrive. It's time for us to even practice the highest form of sanitization.
All right. I take the point about, the country doing relatively well in terms of their cultural practice and in terms of their habits of behavior, the sanitization, the socialization, etc. I take that point. But I mean, for instance, the union as a body have come together with the private sector and they have begun to discuss, I think in a very constructive way, how we might collaborate together. That's to say the business and the union system in the country. Are you part of that, to collaborate to get the economy opened up? Are you part of that?
Yes, I'm the president of the National Trade Union Center, and NATUC is represented there, mostly through our General Secretary, Comrade Anisette.
Okay, but I mean, if you kind of collaborating with the private sector to get the economy open, and you're working on ways and means to get it open under conditions of peace rather than tension and conflict and so on, I mean, isn't that a positive development? Do you see that as a constructive step? I think it is.
Sometimes I can see it as constructive, but most times it's not. Because what we want is real and permanent solutions. Permanent solutions to the threat of the coronavirus affecting a greater part of society. We want to have conversations to stop the threat. And the only way to stop the threat is to practice what we have been practicing since March of 2020. We have been practicing regular sanitization of all surfaces, doorknobs, etc., washing our hands regularly, social distancing, wear your mask when you're having conversations with people. However, since the introduction of vaccines in March 2021, 1 year later, what we have is almost like they have discarded that practice and saying to people, vaccinate or operate. It's no longer to practice safety means, or healthy means, or means that are conducive to keeping the health of the public alive and thriving. They're not practicing that. They have cast all of that aside. People are no longer sanitizing surfaces regularly. They're no longer washing their hands regularly. You can't even find pipe by somebody's places now. They say to you, vaccinate or operate. And the private sector has to understand, this is not just about capitalism. This is about also the working class. They must come to understand this is not only about profit. It's also about sense, common sense, not just dollars. It's about sense. And they don't think that. Some of them are thinking that we want to have our staff fully vaccinated. And we hear you, but we want them fully vaccinated. We don't want that. None of them, none of the private sector we have engaged in so far have fully come to terms and say, you know what? We will leave it up to the people. None of those big organizations have come and said that. It's always we are going back to review it. What there is to review. People were born with their rights, their freedom of choice. And you want to say because you are running a private sector, your private business, you only want people by you who are totally vaccinated. Are those persons who are by you, are those persons sick? If they are sick, then we say send them to the hospital. If they are not sick, then allow them to enjoy the freedom of living without a virus. Allow them to do that. That's my problem. The private sector seems to have their head fixed in a particular direction. It's all about money. It's all about my way or the highway. It's my business, my choice. Have you heard the president spoke? Saying that she only wants vaccinated persons around her mother to work with her. That's a wrong idea. It's wrong. And I don't think that that is something that should be tolerated. What do you mean only one vaccine? Sorry. What happened to the unvaccinated people that are free from COVID? That is discrimination. They have never caught COVID in their life. What makes you think that you will catch it now? They have been working with you all through the years before vaccine came around. All of a sudden now, you're pressuring with our vaccine. What if those who are vaccinated are not the best trained people, are not the best ones for the job, are not the most confidential person? You are going to trade that just to have someone vaccinated. What does vaccination say? It says that you are immune from capturing it or from catching the disease, the virus. No. Persons who are vaccinated are catching the virus as much as persons who are unvaccinated. And the foolish excuse they give, they wouldn't die with it. But I know persons who have been vaccinated twice and they die with it. That's thousands of persons in the world today who have been vaccinated. Tens of thousands who die after they've been vaccinated. So what's the point we are making? We have to stop placing all our eggs in one basket, which is a vaccination basket, and say to people, we do not want persons with COVID working here. Continue your temperature testing, continue your health surveillance, look for people who have runny nose, who have cough, who have cold, etc. Tell workers if they're not feeling well, don't come to work. They would be paid, protect their salary, protect their income. Once you do that, you have more persons fessing up, saying, well, I am not feeling well, I'm not coming today. Do things like random testing of the public. There are persons who want to be tested. You must just say, okay, we are going in the sports club, we are going in the bar, we are going in the community center, we are going in the basketball court, we are going wherever people tend to get together to congregate and do the testing. So they are not doing that. That is how we treat with coronavirus. We must treat it aggressively, go around, have a parallel system. The full healthcare system is one way, and the next healthcare system that deals with the run-of-the-mill things the other way. Right now, persons are coming to hospital and get contaminated. There is no separation. It happens in Tobago, it happens in South, it happens in North Central, Williams, it happens in Port of Spain. People are becoming contaminated just to do a dressing. Well, we have to deal with this holistically and aggressively, but not by placing mandates on people. The private sector are bullish.
Don't you think that the health sector workers who are frontline workers in this COVID matter should be vaccinated? What about people coming into the hospitals? Don't you think that they should be tested for COVID before they enter, in order to keep at least the health system and the hospital and the health center systems relatively safe? Won't you advocate vaccination and testing and protection for patients coming in and vaccination for health workers? What do you think about that?
First of all, let me say that I believe in vaccination. Yeah, I have not been vaccinated.
You got vaccinated, by the way?
I have not been vaccinated.
All right, okay.
I believe in vaccination. I believe vaccination can help us prevent the catching or the contracting of several viruses, etc., and it can preserve life. What I do not believe is the mass vaccination or mandatory vaccination of persons with a drug, with a vaccine for emergency use only. Emergency use vaccine only. It's for emergencies. I'm not sure 1.5 million people in this country is under the threat of contracting the virus. I don't believe so. And then the whole idea of saying to your staff that you must be fully vaccinated or don't come back to work is wrong. It is as wrong as you have in your house white carpet, but you are telling your children, when you come into my house, wash your foot, then come inside. But the regular visitors who come to your house, you are letting them come in with their shoes. If you are saying to your staff, look, you must be vaccinated to work here, the next thing those wicked people are going to do, those wicked private sector people will do, is to mandate the public and say to the public, unless you are vaccinated, you can't come inside here. Unless you can produce a card, you can't come inside here. What's that going to do? It's going to force people to gerrymander the thing, come up with their own vaccination card, make it, and bring it and say, look, there's my card. We do not want a society that forces people into a life of crime. We just cannot have it. What we want to do is allow persons to make the right choice. If vaccination is good, then prove it, convince them, spend the time convincing them. Don't bully them. When we look at nations like America, the president of America is saying he's not going to pass no mandatory law to vaccinate the public sector. He's not going to pass any mandatory law. When you look at Australia, they are not passing any mandatory law for persons to be vaccinated. These are big countries we look to, right?
Yeah.
England is trying it, but England is a litigious country. People will litigate, and they've already started to litigate because people have money and people protect their rights in England. France have tried it, and you could see the riots on the street.
Okay.
This place has tried it. St. Vincent have tried it, and there's now the famous stone. We have to be careful. People in the Caribbean are pushing back. In the Virgin Islands, in Antigua, in Barbados, they are pushing back. We do not want the government to create conditions where the private sector could feel as if they could stick their hands in our face and say, smell that. If you can't get vaccinated, don't come to work. Let me say this to you, Dr. Bhoe. We have had a case, right, where a particular company in Charlotte Street, I'm going to call it a company, owned by persons of Chinese descent. They sent out voice note telling their staff, do not come back to work unless you are vaccinated. Those workers came to us. We sent off one letter, and I could tell you, in 3 days' time, they were told you don't have to forget the mandatory vaccination, just come to work with double mask. And so I continue to appeal to the public. If you feel you have nobody to turn to, nowhere to go, you feel you are alone, you're a single parent, you're frustrated, come to the PSA. Come to Watson Jew. We will defend you. Come to Natuk. We will defend you. And I charge everyone, every affiliate of Natuk, whether they are vaccinated or not, to please defend the people. Because people have rights. And if you can't choose, you are no longer a human. You are a robot. We must have choice, and we have to protect it.
But people are making the choices. You are right. Some people are hesitant about vaccination.
That's right.
But I think more and more people are getting vaccinated. Would you be willing, you don't have to if you don't want to, would you be willing to share with the audience, with the viewing public and the listening public, why it is you yourself have not yet vaccinated?
Well, two reasons.
Yeah.
One, I believe that I must stand with the power of choice. I want persons to have the power of choice. And I believe that if I take the vaccine, first of all, that I will not be able to champion the rights of people who are saying, no, I don't want the vaccine at this point in time. There are persons who are vaccine hesitant, and there are persons who don't want any vaccine at all whatsoever. I choose to stand with those people. And I'm saying somebody has to defend them. If I take the vaccine, it becomes difficult for me, personally, to defend these people with conviction. Know that I have taken the vaccine. I don't think I'm in interest. My circle is a very small circle. Some persons in my circle have been vaccinated, and some persons have not been vaccinated. But I continue to tell people, practice the highest health and safety standard. That's one of the reasons I'm standing with people for choice. The other reason is that I don't believe that they're telling us all the truth. Frankly, I believe that the trial vaccines are trial. And I'm waiting for those vaccines to become fully licensed and fully approved by the Food and Drug Administration of America, by the reputable enforcement and authorization organization in England and Australia. These are major English-speaking countries. And I'm saying, I will stand when they legitimize a vaccine. I think it's good. I will say, right. They have done the quality test of manufacturing, the efficacy test, yes, how effective it is. They have done the safety test, yes, and they have looked at the benefits to risk ratio over a period of time, and they are satisfied that these are the outcomes and these are the benefits. And when I look at that, I will say, I will take my chances at that time. Right now, it's still under examination. The whole world is a world full of trials. Why should I sign up for trial? I don't want to be a trial. I don't want to be a guinea pig. Not me.
Okay, I'd just like to share. I just want to share three things based on the things that you've articulated. The first thing is that I think that final approval for Pfizer vaccines are soon to come. I just mentioned that, but that does not mean it has been done. That is coming.
12 to 24 months.
Yes, and others may follow. The second thing I want to say is that the President of the United States has in fact mandated workers in the federal government system to be vaccinated, or they have to take the tests. I can't remember whether
PCR tests.
Yeah, they have to take it. I can't remember if it's every week or every 2 weeks, but he has done that. And in France, although you've had protests, you've also had an upsurge in the amount of people vaccinated, and they have instituted their policy, not as law. They did not go to the parliament for this, but they have instituted their policy in which you really need to show that you are vaccinated to go into a public place that is indoors.
Restaurants, theaters.
Yes, that's right. So, I mean, people are taking this thing into account. I respect your views, and I thank you for sharing it because it's important. But you also said you are not anti-vaccine.
No, I'm not.
Right. And okay, so that is good. I want to play some clips for you and see how you would respond to them. They are from guests that have been on this show before. One of them is the dean of the law school, a lady I'm sure that you have respect for, Rosemary Bell Antoine. And let's hear what she has to say. It's a short clip, yeah.
It's not just a human rights issue, but though many people instinctively think of it as human rights. Yes, human rights is an important dimension, but when it comes to the private sphere, the employment workplace, which is actually the biggest issue today, really is not a question of human rights. People use that term loosely, and that's simply because human rights doesn't apply in that particular sphere. Yeah, it would be labor law, and in some ways administrative law if you're talking about universities, for instance, because that's also an issue. Are you going to compel university students to go back? We had a case just yesterday where it was ruled that actually came. I was so excited it happened just before this interview, and I'll tell you about it later. But yes, so it's a whole host of legal principles from labor law, from administrative law, and even tort, harm and all of that.
Yeah, so she's making the case that, okay, human rights is a consideration. And remember, she's a human rights lawyer. Eh? She's a human rights specialist. She is a human rights advocate. And she is saying that she recognizes that, but it's not only that, because it involves other people, not just you. It involves the rights of other people. And more than that, she's citing the case made by the Supreme Court, citing the decision made by the Supreme Court of the United States, in which universities, over 400 of them, got the go-ahead from the Supreme Court to demand from students that they be vaccinated before they come in. I have a couple more clips, all of them different. But would you like to respond to that? How you respond to that? Are you convinced or are you not convinced?
First of all, I want to say that Dr. Anne-Marie Bell Antoine, if I get the name correct, is a very good friend of mine. Yeah. I think she's a luminary. I think we have had this conversation before now. Yeah. We spoke on the phone privately, and she did share with me her view, and I did share with her my view. Our views are not worlds apart. The slight difference between my view, well, not different, but the slight thing I pointed out to her is that in our country, COVID-19 is still not an occupational disease. Until COVID-19 becomes an occupational disease, you cannot tell people, you cannot argue successfully and say to anybody that COVID-19 is affecting persons on my job. No, COVID-19 is a public health concern internationally, and as such, it's a pandemic. When it becomes an occupational disease in Trinidad and Tobago, what we would be saying is that this can be contracted on the job. It's a workplace disease, and as such, I have a right under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, Section 6, to ensure, insofar as reasonable and practicable, the health and welfare of all my employees, all of them. So therefore, in doing that, I will want to institute this, because what it does for the worker by making it an occupational disease, it protects the worker. That should the worker contract the disease on the job, the worker will get sick pay. Yeah, the worker will be able to get full remuneration. Could sue. The worker has rights. The worker has rights. If the worker is the primary or secondary suspect in the case, contact, the worker would be paid while they are on quarantine. It gives the workers rights while taking some rights of the workers, but more than that, it protects the workplace. We have not made it a health and safety disease, occupational disease, and as such, we are playing with fire. And I'm saying to them, I'm looking for a case, because I did employment law. I'm looking, I have a master's in employment law. I'm looking for a case and I'm putting it out there right now. If there's any public servant in this country, any public sector worker who falls under the PSA, any employer who is mandating you to take a vaccine or mandatory PCR test at your own expense, come to us. We will make them an example. I have studied this thing, and it doesn't matter where, in which jurisdiction this thing has been tried. A case is only good based on what you put in the case. You're not having a COVID case. What you bring to the court is what the court will adjudicate upon. So I salute Dr. Antoine. Beautiful brain. I love to listen to her. Luminary. And I support what she's saying. But I contextualize it from an employment point of view, that you can't force no employee to take any vaccine until that is declared an occupational disease, which means a disease of the workplace. And we have not done that here. It is done in several countries of the world, but not Trinidad and Tobago. I hope you appreciate the point where I'm coming from with that.
Let me share another clip with you here. Broom.
Yes.
So it's important to ensure that we put it out there that an employer just can't do whatever they deal with the situation in a high-handed manner. It has to be dealt with fairly. You must treat the employees with respect and not just say, if all they don't get vaccinated, bust out, right? This is what we're doing. We want to do this because give an explanation. With the PCR test, there are some people who say that Section 12 and Section 37 of the Occupational Safety and Health Act can possibly ban an employer from requesting a negative PCR test every week or every 2 weeks. But that is left for interpretation, and that's something that the court may have to deal with later on. So unions need to let employees know the other side of this thing, the detriment, the potential detriment that refusing this and fighting it and challenging it and going down to court. Because I know a lot of employers are going to say, okay, if you want to sue me, go ahead. I will deal with that 4 years down the road, we'll deal with it.
All right. You know Dr. Broom, right? Jamil Broom.
Yeah, she's a son of a son. She's a Tobagonian.
And he also has a program once a week he will have a program once a week in this station. But I value his perspective on labor because he's very pro-worker. I value his perspective on worker employment, employee relations. And you heard what he said there. You know that you talked about contextualization, but he talks also about contextualization, which is that you can't simply tell a worker, he's fired because he didn't take the vaccine. But in fact, you can create the conditions in which you can have the context of dialogue upon which an employer may be able to take decisions that can be tested in court, of course, by the worker, because that can be done. But he is doubtful as to whether the contest will be carried in a court of law. How do you respond to that?
Well, let me say Dr. Brooms is a fellow Tobagonian, and congratulations to him. He's a brilliant mind also. He made reference to the Health and Safety Act, Section 10 and Section, I think it's 12. Those will speak about the rights of the employees, rights of the employer, etc. Right? I wish to go a little bit to a different piece of law. It's called the Data Protection Act. Right? And what the Data Protection Act does, it simply says to you, a citizen of this country, that anybody who is taking your data, they must say to you what they are doing with the data, how that data will be stored, who will have access to that data, yeah, how long will they keep that data for, how will they dispose of that data. These are questions they must answer. That organization must have a data policy. So I wish to give a free piece of advice, and I'm also an expert in the field of labor employment law.
Yes.
I wish to give a free piece of advice out there to those employers whose head are hard like stone. Before you begin to demand a PCR test from someone, or demand someone to show their vaccination card, if you want to make it mandatory, you must first have a data policy. And that data policy must subscribe to the laws of this land. You have to talk to your union. You have to have your employees involved. You just can't come and say you demand that. And that's what he was speaking to generally when he was saying that when you look at 10 and I think it's still on 12.22, which is the rights of the employee, something like that, right? He was saying that they may not be able to demand. I'm saying also to this other piece of legislation, which is the Data Protection Act, and you have to consider. So I value his view. I value his view. I'm not going to say it's not a good. I value his view. At least he's thinking, he's standing on the side of labor, and he made some good points there in defense of the working class. And at the same time, a middle of the road approach would also give the employers the rights to explore options to bring their place into the best health and safety standard.
I'll probably only have two questions possible now because we have to go to the news. But I want to shift a little bit and ask about Tobago. Are you concerned, for instance, that you have a number of rising cases in Tobago? I want to say that I am very concerned because Tobago is a small island. You have 60,000 people. And I'm worried because the spread is escalating in families. And I wonder, given the nature of Tobago, because Tobago is built on community after community, from east to west, basically, and north and south of the island, too. It really is a problem in Tobago. Are you concerned about that? Would you advise people to go and get the vaccine there?
I'm very much concerned about the rise of COVID cases and the rise in deaths of COVID-related cases. To me, it spells of total failure by the PNM-led holdover THA executive, Tracy Davison, who is the one responsible for health, wellness, and social services for family life, who is also the political leader for the Tobago PNM, is doing a very bad job. Apparently, what she has done is to cause to be mixed both the people who are healthy and those who are sick. That, to me, is something that is causing the spread of the disease in the hospitals in particular. And they are not doing sufficient to make Tobago unique. Tobago is a different place from Trinidad. Tobago ought to come up with its own standards and not rely upon Trinidad for standards or policy direction. We ought to have meetings with major stakeholders and listen to the ideas, distill them, and implement the best idea for Tobago. What we have in Tobago is a Trinidad solution for a Tobago problem. That, to me, cannot work. It's like wearing your father clothes or your mother clothes. It just can't fit. We need a bespoke approach, a tailor-made approach. We need something like that. And the PDP will do that.
All right. So you think that any escalation in COVID is due to political failure by the current administration in the THA, and you think that a Trinidad solution for the politics of Tobago is not desirable, nor is it acceptable? How would...
Yes. Quickly, let me just say to you quickly. When we look at Grenada, the case in Grenada, St. Vincent, and these places, it is small because they have full control. They don't have an imported solution. They have full control. They have something that's tailor-made for their country. So back to you.
Okay. How would Tobago change? How would it be different if you became the elected leader in charge of Tobago affairs in a House of Assembly election?
Well, let me just admit to you, while our constitution allows for the political leader to become chief secretary, I am not interested in the position of chief secretary. Okay. I have asked my colleague, and he have consented, Farley Chavez Augustine, to become the chief secretary on the party's behalf, and he has consented. So when we win the election, my comrade and brother Farley Chavez Augustine, he would become the chief secretary. My role may be that of a deputy chief secretary, where I could assist and where I could spend more time doing other things on the ground. So I think that with the PDP leadership, one thing we would do is to always engage stakeholders and have the widest margin of participation. We call it participatory democracy. In our political organization, we practice the highest level of democracy. So you could have anybody could disagree with me in the organization, and they are not thrown out. They are not sent to the cleaners. We share different views. Dr. Faith, who has a PhD in public health, right? She has her view. She believes in vaccination. She supports vaccinations fully. And I support vaccination fully also. But I'm saying to people, it cannot be mandatory. So people will say that we have a difference of view, but we don't. I'm saying there can be no mandatory vaccination as yet, because simply this is a trial vaccine. We are not sure if it is working, and persons have their right. And mandatory vaccination must also be relative. It cannot be mandatory for every citizen. That can't happen. That can never happen in any place of the world. Mandatory vaccination is only relative. So I say as yet, mandatory vaccination could only be in a particular case under particular circumstances. That is what mandatory vaccination means. So let me explain it out for people. Particular place, particular circumstances. It doesn't mean every human being from the time you are born, you must be vaccinated. No.
Okay, you are leader now of one of the most powerful
Progressive Democratic Patriots. Yeah.
Sorry?
Of the Progressive Democratic Patriots. You need to know that name, because that name will be a very powerful name in the country soon.
No, I was going to the union first.
You
are leader of one of the most powerful unions in the country, and
yes,
you could emerge as one of the first. You are already a major political force in Tobago, and with the hope of the union, and with the leverage in the union. Both Trinidad and Tobago. I'm not denying I'm not denying
no, the reports are already there. Last year, 22 political organizations competed, and we fall within the first three. Yes. Right? Within a number, we just compete in Tobago. So we are now number 3 in the entire political scheme. We are the third force, if you put it that way, in the country.
Okay.
The Progressive Democratic Patriots.
Won't you consider then yourself part of the ruling class? And if you won election in Tobago, you'd be even more so. And why do you make this distinction between the ruling class and others? Is there really a ruling class in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes, there is a ruling class. There's a class that rock back in their chair and they have policies being made for them, while the working class can't have one policy made for them. The Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act has not been updated. All right? The Trade Union Act has not been updated. The Industrial Relations Act has not been updated. A number of legislation of the benefits workers, they have not been updated. And so I'm saying, when you have a balance in the system, this is what our society to strive for: social justice. When we have a balance in our system, you will have no group feeling disadvantaged. The man who labors hard and the owners of business or the owners of capitalism, none of them will feel pressured. I believe the business people in our society, the wealthy class, the ruling class, the bourgeois class, they have a right to enjoy the finer things in life. But I also believe that the working class, the proletariat, the gollywalks, these people on the ground, the middle class, they have a right also to aspire and to achieve the finer things in life. They must be able to achieve it. And it's the role of government to create the staircase, create the opportunities where these persons could move from being a man who has nothing to something. So you do that through education, through training, and through opportunities.
We're going to have to close now, Mr. Duke. I want to thank you for coming on the program and having a forthright discussion with me.
Thank you very much.
I thought the discussion was very open, and I commend you on that. And I want to thank listeners and viewers for watching the program, and join us next week when we have a fine lineup of people for you. We move on now to the 8 o'clock news with Chanel Al-Suran.